Good evening. It is Tuesday night, and tonight I'll be talking about the effects of stress on the brain. And if you haven't already picked up my seven helpful evaluations if you suspect dementia resource, you can do that. Today I will post the link below this talk, and if there's someone that you suspect has dementia or mild cognitive impairment, it would be very helpful for you to get some, if not all, of the evaluations to get a better understanding of what's going on. But tonight I want to talk about the effects of stress on the brain. And tonight's talk will probably be a short talk, kind of like last week. And I'm continuing in my series on aging, healthy aging, brain health, and in the last part of the series, I will be talking about dementia, different types of dementia, dementia caregiving, support, and coaching. So before I talk about the effects of stress on the brain, I want to talk a little bit about what stress is. There are lots of different definitions of stress, but when I think about stress, I think about the way that people respond to a situation or an experience, maybe something new or something that they have not experienced many times before. And when they experience that thing, that new thing, the thing that happens with us is that we categorize that experience and we decide if the thing that we're experiencing, is it a challenge or is it a threat? So we go through this appraisal system when we encounter something new. So it could be a new person, it could be a new city, it could be a new experience, but anytime that we're encountering something new or something that we haven't encountered for a while that has some new elements of it, we go through this appraisal system and we decide, is this thing something that is a threat to us? And by threat, I mean there's the potential for loss of life or serious injury, or is it something that is a challenge? And if we deem that thing to be a challenge, then that means we feel like, okay, we can do the things that we need to do to meet the demand of that challenge. So whatever it is, it's not too overwhelming for us. And that's why we may categorize it as a challenge versus a threat. If we deem something to be a threat, then typically that means we don't feel like we have the adequate resources that we need in order to address the issue. And when we experience when we appraise something to fall in both of those categories, we experience physiological reactions or physical symptoms. Maybe you might notice that your heart is beating faster, or that you're breathing heavier, or you have shortness of breath, muscle tension, headaches, stomach aches. So all of these things, our bodies can tell us that we're experiencing some type of stressor, some type of physical reaction to that new thing. And in short bursts, experiencing those kind of symptoms can be helpful. Experiencing stress, or what may be referred to as eustress, it can be helpful. It can help us to accomplish tasks. It can help motivate us to plan things, maybe to clean up, to get things organized. But when we experience those physical reactions, over a long period of time, meaning that the stress becomes what we call chronic, it can have a detrimental impact on our health and on our brain health, particularly. When our nervous system responds to something that is a stressor or a challenge or a threat, it triggers this flight or fight system to be activated, and that's just a protective mode that we have naturally within us as humans, to and other animals as well, to protect us if there's danger or something that we sense to be have the potential for danger. It activates this alarm system, and when that alarm system is activated, then there are hormones that are sent out throughout the body to help us to be able to respond to whatever that new thing is. And that's amazing. So it can help us and help us to save our lives in a situation where we really are facing something that is threatening or has a potential to injure us severely. The problem is that our bodies and minds respond, really our nervous system responds the same way to a life-threatening situation, like a tiger chasing us, or if you're in a car accident where it's you sustain some major injuries or could potentially sustain major injuries. Our nervous system responds to that in the same way that it would respond to some other type of experience that you would have just on a day-to-day basis that you might consider to be stressful. So just say that you may be overloaded with work. Your nervous system is going to react in the same way. And when this is happening, time after time after time after time, it can impact you in a negative way. And that's the other side of stress. So one side where it can be helpful in short bursts, we may call that eustress. And then from there, we call it acute stress, or something that you might be dealing with, for a short period of time. But then over long periods of time, it becomes chronic stress. And the chronic stress is what can really be harmful. Now, experiencing stress can impact your brain in the sense that it can impact your cognitive functioning. And last week I talked a little bit about different types of cognitive functioning: memory, learning, processing, attention, focusing and sustaining your attention for long periods of time, being able to shift your attention, doing higher order processing tasks and things like that. So that can be impacted negatively if you experience stress chronically over long periods of time. Okay. So what are some of the things that you can do to try to minimize the impact of the stress that you experience? Well, a lot of times people feel stressed or anxious when they have experiences that were unexpected or things that were unpredictable. And if you can establish a routine, or if there are things that you determine over time and that are stressful that you can prepare for, that can help to minimize the impact of the stress on you in general, in a physical sense, and also on your brain. So establishing some type of routine and predictability. And this is why people that have a lot of anxiety sometimes can be more rigid because they want things to flow in a certain way and always go that way and consistently go that way, because it helps to manage their anxiety and helps them to feel like they have a sense of control of what's going on. And to some degree, you may have control because you can control, those small little aspects of it. But it also helps you to be able to think about, what you're going to do in that particular situation. But life is not always like that, where you can have things that are predictable and where you can be the person that actually determines what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And that's why it's important to have some cognitive flexibility. But in the situations when you can set up some parameters and some routines, that will definitely help to minimize the impact of stress on your brain and your cognitive functioning, because stress can definitely affect your memory and your ability to just take in new information. Because when we experience stress, we activate that, as I said earlier, that flight or fight system, which is the stress response. And the part of the brain that governs the fight flight system is the older part of the brain that is responsible for our, keeping us alive, basically. It's more focused on survival. And when we're in that mode, our higher order thinking part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that distinguishes humans from some other beings, that part is shut down to a degree, not completely, obviously, but we're not able to think as clearly because we're functioning in survival mode. And so that's why when people experience a lot of stress, they may do things that they don't typically do. They may, make mistakes that they might not normally make. They may forget things. They may not be able to process a lot of information. So it's important to try to do things to mitigate that. And again, try to find ways to get as much control of the situation as you can. But also remember that that's not always possible. So in the instances when it's not possible, think of alternative things that can help you to feel comfortable. Another thing that can help to protect the brain from the effects of stress, again, is sleep. Last week I talked a lot about the importance of sleep and the importance of sleep on brain health. That's the time that we typically get rejuvenated, but if you're feeling stressed, most sleep problems are associated with some stress. And I do a lot of veteran disability evaluations, and sometimes they're wondering, why in the world am I seeing a psychologist if I'm getting evaluation for sleep problems? And that's why, because a lot of problems related to sleep are related to stress and anxiety. And so it can create a cycle. So you can not be able to sleep because you're stressed and you're up and worried about, whatever. And then you start getting worried about not being able to sleep. And it just creates that cycle, and it's hard to kind of get out of that. So some things that you can do is to try to establish a regular sleep routine. go to sleep around the same time every night. And if you're having problems sleeping, even on the weekends, you want to try to go to sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time. Don't drink any caffeine after maybe about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because that can be disruptive to sleep. And if you're in the bed for more than 15-20 minutes and you're not able to sleep, you should get out of the bed. And I know that sounds like maybe that is not the right thing to do, but you want to make a strong association between your bed and sleeping. And if you're sitting up in your bed and you're worried or stressed about whatever work or family, or you're stressed because you can't go to sleep, you're going to start to associate the bed with stress as opposed to associating the bed with sleep. And it's just going to perpetuate the sleep problem. So if you're having problems sleeping and you're in the bed for more than 15-20 minutes, you should get out of the bed and do something that's not going to be too stimulating. Maybe read a book or listen to some music that is relaxing. And when you start to feel sleepy, you can get back in the bed. Another thing that falls in line with trying to get some predictability is organization. If you can find ways to organize different aspects of your life so that there's some predictability, if you set a schedule that you do certain things at certain times, that will help to reduce the stress, which in turn will help to decrease the likelihood of stress having a negative impact on your brain or on your cognitive functioning. And by cognitive functioning, I'm talking about things like thinking, memory, learning, processing information. And a big, huge thing that can impact the way that stress affects you psychologically as well as physically is the way that you think about it. So the first week that I started this series, I talked about how thinking impacts your health in a certain way when it comes to age beliefs. And if you didn't listen to my talk, you can go back to, that was 2 weeks ago, whatever, that was the first Tuesday in October, I think. I talked about how negative age beliefs can have a negative impact on aging, as positive beliefs about aging can have a positive impact on the way that a person ages. So the same kind of thing applies here in general. When you think about an experience that you're having and you categorize it as a threat, again, meaning that you feel like you don't have the adequate resources to be able to address it, versus categorizing it as a challenge, which is something that might get your adrenaline going a little bit, but you feel like, okay, I got this, I can, do whatever it takes to put this fire out or deal with whatever the issue is. The way that you appraise those situations will also influence the way that the situation impacts you. And so one of the things that I've learned from doing therapy for several years is the power of our thoughts. So, if you're thinking that this situation is a stressful situation, then it's going to be a stressful situation, right? And if you're thinking that it's overwhelming and that you can't manage it, it's going to have more of an impact on you than thinking, okay, yeah, this is a stressful situation, but I can do X, Y, and Z in order to address the stress or to try to mitigate these factors so that they don't have significant impact on me. And sometimes people think of worst case scenario all the time whenever they experience something, that they perceive to be stressful or bad or traumatic. And I would challenge you to start doing something as simple as quantifying the experience that you're having. And this is something that a lot of therapists teach their clients to use something called SUDS, the Subjective Unit of Distress, SUDS. It's a scale that we often talk to our clients about. So I would encourage you to use this. It's I usually say 1 to 10 scale. Some people will say 0 to 10. I think there's always going to be some level of probably, stress or anxiety, a little bit maybe. Even if it's, you're having an experience that's positive, you may experience some adrenaline rush. But 0 to 1 is the experience of not feeling stressed, not feeling overwhelmed. It's the least amount of stress or problems. And, think of what that would be for you during a time when you're not feeling stressed. I want you to just do this exercise. So for me, it would probably be being on a beach somewhere, probably in Hawaii. So that would be my 0 to 1 SUDS rating. And then on the other end is a 10. What is the thing that would be the worst case scenario for you, or what experience that you've had that has been the most upsetting or the most distressing? It could be you're in a car accident, or that you lost a family member, a loved one to death, or you lost a job, whatever it is. Think of that event if there is one that comes to mind. And these will be your anchor points. So you have your 0 to 1, which is your calm place, your relaxation place. And then you have your 10, which is distress. Okay. And so whenever you have experiences throughout the day, I want you, and it doesn't have to be anything that you perceive to be negative. It can be any experience. I want you to just start practicing using this scale, the 0 to 10 scale, and say, okay, this is a 6. Okay. This is a 2. This is a 3, right? So that, one, when you do have an experience that you appraise to be very stressful or even a little stressful, you will have some gauge to use to compare it against. So if, you can think of what would be a 10 and you compare what you're experiencing today to that experience, is that a 10? Or am I just exaggerating the situation? Because sometimes when we feel overwhelmed, we just say, oh, this is the worst thing that could have ever happened. But really, if you think of what your actual 10 is and compare it to what you're going through now, it can help to bring some reality to the situation, and also give you more confidence that you can be able to deal with that challenge. So if you could deal with this 10 over here, which if I said that my 10 was losing my mother, and then today somebody got on my nerves at work, and in the moment I thought I might feel like that's a 10. And then if I think about my anchor point of, okay, a real 10 is the loss of a parent. Does this compare to that? No, not really. This is probably, it might be a 6 or 7 or something, but it's definitely not a 10. And it probably is not a 6 or 7, really, once I start to really put things in perspective. But if you have those anchor points with your SUD scale, rating scale, it can help you to feel more empowered to be able to deal with a situation. So that is your homework over the next week or so, to start using that 0 to 10 scale. Like if you have an experience that you think is positive, where do you rate that? If you have an experience that you interpret to be negative or stressful, where do you rate that? And just kind of get in the habit of that, so that when you do have an experience that's really stressful, you're not flooded with emotion. You may experience the emotion, but you're not flooded and paralyzed with the emotion, because you're going to say, okay, I understand this is an 8 or 10, and this is what I need to do to address it. So in general, what I usually tell my clients is that once you get in a situation that is anywhere above a 5, then you should start doing things that you feel like are helpful as far as managing stress. So for some people, that could be, calling a friend or a relative, or somebody that is supportive. For other people, it could be taking a trip somewhere. For different people, it's something different. Some people might think shopping. But I would say write a list of those things, so that when you are in a situation where you experience something that you rate to be a 5 or higher, you will start referencing your resource list, because you don't want it to get all the way up to a 8, 9, or 10, right? So the first thing that I usually teach people to do is a simple breathing exercise. And the one that I usually teach first is something called square breathing. And it's simply inhaling for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, and hold for 4 counts. And then you repeat that 4 times. So you have homework. I see all my family is on here. I see Levon Ward, my neighbor and cousin, Geraldine Relaford, my sister, Tanya Knight, Maria, aka Maria, and my brother Guy. So I'm gonna test all of you on on the SUDS rating to see if you practice that, and on square breathing. All right. Well, thank you all for watching, and come back next Tuesday. All right. Take care.